Well, we're getting towards the end of the political year. The last major act of MyEFO is done. Where does the polling put us at? And the so-called summer reset, so much spoken about what actually needs to happen. Joining me live is Australian Financial Review political editor Philip Curry. Thanks for your time as ever. A few different polls out there. We actually got Newspoll today suggesting Labor sneak back into the lead. Ipsos poll in your paper has it back 50-50, but it's close, isn't it? Yeah. Everyone agrees it's got a lot closer over the past few months, and Labor's primary is down as well. And if there were an election today, there'd be a strong chance Labor's in minority, which I guess isn't a shock from the position they're in, but still a bit of reality check from mid-year.
Yeah, look, ours is a freshwater poll, not a...
apologies.
Look, we had them at 50-50 on the two-party. Newspoll had Labor back 52-48, so sort of margin of error stuff, but the construction you put on it is relative to your last poll. So we had them definitely sliding a little bit further down the chain since September. We're going to do them every 3 months. But I think, unarguably, Tom, if you look at where the government was this time last year going into Christmas, they were in a much better position on a number of fronts. I mean, in our poll, we had them at 54% two-party vote going to last Christmas. Now, whether it's 52 or 50, that's, slide. Their primary vote has really fallen since then. It's now below where it was at the last election. But the big falls are in the Prime Minister's approval ratings and his preferred Prime Minister. Yeah. And we looked into the issues as well. They've lost their lead as economic managers. They've lost their lead on managing the cost of living. All those things have just ravaged them over the last year, and the voice and stuff like that. So I think, the safe takeout from whatever poll you read today is they're in a much worse spot now than they were 12 months ago. And that sets up a challenge for the next year being the election year.
The interesting thing about Anthony Albanese, you see, came to that election quite unpopular for an opposition leader. I mean, we always talk about Peter Dutton and Tony. Unknown, but looking at the polling on him, for example, on Newspoll, he was -18, -11, -5 in the final month. I mean, that's not popular.
No.
So popularity for him isn't intrinsically important, maybe like but these levels still have to be a concern when you're so high. We knew it would come down. Well, you don't want to be negative.
Yeah, well, the Freshwater poll had his preferred Prime Minister lead over Peter Dutton, closing from 26 points to 4 in a year. Yep. And he's now got a higher net negative in his approval than Dutton has now, -5 to -2. So I think what happened after the election, people forget the country voted out Scott Morrison in the last election. They didn't necessarily vote in Labor. They only got a 32.6% primary vote. And there's this sort of thing overtook everyone after the election. Oh, Labor's really popular. Albanese was really popular. They weren't. They fell across the line.
Their primary dropped from 2019 to 2022.
But then what happened? There was a burst in popularity because they governed very well in their first, 8 months to a year. They kept their promises. They were responsible. There was a stability, and they did well out of that, and deservedly so. But then they had a bad year. They got to the Aston by-election, which they won against the odds, and that was because people still weren't blaming them for the cost of living. But as the Labor hierarchy said, that will change, and it did change. The cost of living is now just really annoying and won't go away, and people are getting angry at the government over it. And the Prime Minister didn't do well out of the voice. He went overseas too much. All those sorts of things have just built. And now they're in I wouldn't say dire, but in a challenging position. They've got a year and a bit to turn it around, and they could well do. I mean, this isn't translating into great gouts of support for the opposition, although their primary vote in the poll today was pretty good, 39 now. So
when we talk, I mean, it's probably the most spoken about phrase at this time of year now, the summer reset.
Yeah.
And what are you meant to do there? Because the issue with cost of living is huge, right?
Yeah. Well, that's
over summer, things are going to still be expensive. There's nothing new. I haven't done anything new in MyEFO. So do they need to do something?
Well, it was interesting. I heard the Prime Minister on radio this morning, and it was interesting because Sabra Lane, the ABC asked him about 2 or 3 times. She said, "You've lost your mojo. What are you going to do to put it back?" And not once did he dispute he'd lost his mojo. He said, "Well, what I'll do is a blah, blah, blah."
Our plan, I heard a lot.
Well, yeah, there's reading that list, which is sort of like a dot point thing, like a speaking, what do they call them, speaking points or whatever they issue for the office. Didn't sound that convincing, but what I found even more interesting was he didn't dispute the premise of the question, that he'd lost his mojo. He said, "Well, Sabra, what I'll do is is X, Y, and Z. So I just think he's off his game at the moment, and he needs to get on his game. The trouble and this used to happen a lot with the Howard government, a lot of governments, people go away over summer, talk amongst family and friends, and come back, and the polls are often worse than they were for the incumbent than they were going
That's
into
the worry, because things are still ticking up.
But look, they've got another budget, Tom, in May, and I think it's now beyond doubt, as the Prime Minister and the Treasurer have now said, they'll do stuff on cost of living, more power price relief, things like that. And as Jim Chalmers said last week in an interview with us, look, it's just going to stay rough for a while, but hopefully for Labor, inflation moderates, the RBA starts cutting rates, and once you look at the polls in WA at the moment, it's a lot different to the rest of the country. That's because they're not doing it so hard over there, because things are a lot better. And if all the economic indicators start pointing in the right direction, it's all going to be in the timing, the next election.
Albeit the biggest spending measure in that budget is still the stage 3 tax cuts. And they don't exactly want to shout from the rooftops about it.
Yeah, but, people will be grateful for it eventually. I'm sure they will. I mean, the left isn't going to like them, but,
All right.
everyone gets a tax cut, no matter how much you earn.
Well, enjoy your break.
Thanks, mate.
See you next year when
Indeed.
you go fishing eventually.
A spot of angling is on the cards, mate, for sure.
Phil Curry, thank you.